Right, we might get started with our webinar. Handing over to you now, Nick.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicholas Chu. I'm the Operations Director at the HRIA, and on behalf of the HRIA, welcome to our HIRE20 Virtual Conference. And to this morning's webinar is leading your team through COVID-19. And we're fortunate enough to have Aileen Hiskins from Strategic Alignment Training presenting this morning. And wow, what a pertinent and relevant topic to be going through today. As you're no doubt aware, HIRE20 was cancelled due to the COVID crisis that we're going through right now. But yeah, we made the decision to put on a virtual conference. The rationale behind this is to make sure that as an association, we can provide enough content, knowledge, skills, information to give our members the best possible chance to, number one, weather this storm, but also number two, be in the best position to grow and accelerate out of this crisis as the restrictions ease as well. Just on that note, although the virtual the actual conference didn't happen, we were fortunate enough to have a number of our sponsors partner up with us, and I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors. One thing that we're really looking forward to is being able to work with our sponsors, exhibitors, and welcome our members back for HIRE21, which will be in the Gold Coast. So just a few things about today. A few housekeeping matters in terms of how this will run. Number one, we will have a Q&A functionality enabled. So we encourage you to, if you have any questions during the course of the presentation, please type them in and we'll look to get through those. If we don't get through any of those questions, all of those questions, we will envisage to get back to you after the seminar concludes. Also, if there's a question you have which might be particularly sensitive to, in terms of your organisation and you want some more information, please still do reach out to the National Office. We're more than happy to either answer that from our National Office or to connect you with the relevant presenter as well and hopefully get you some information around that. Number two, we have also enabled a chat functionality where you can chat with the presenters and also amongst the other attendees. If there is an issue with sound quality or indeed the vision, please just put something up in the chat forum just to let us know that we're having some technical difficulties. In the background, we've got the always wonderful Linda and Sally who are pushing the buttons and making this happen. So if something happens, they'll jump on that and see what they can do. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and we will make this available to all of our members with the HRIA, also EWPA and TSHA. It'll be available in the coming days and you can revisit this material and also you can distribute it amongst your work colleagues to pass on any sort of pertinent information. That's it for me. I'll now hand over to Aileen, who will be presenting on leading our team through COVID-19. Thanks very much, Aileen.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick, very much. Just sharing the screen. Just frozen on the screen, Nick. I'm not sure if there's something that you guys may need to do. Sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear me, Nick, but it's frozen on the screen. And Sally, if you can hear me, if you could potentially put up my slide deck, because I'm not actually able to move at the moment. So I'm hoping you can hear. I've got. Oh.
That's okay. Let me just bear with me for a second.
So just whilst we're getting the slides up onto the screen, or the first slide up, I'll just give you a bit of context to this. I put this program together back towards the end of March. And at that time, it was obviously we were in the height of such uncertainty. And the tool that I will use today and explore today is one that I think is incredibly useful through crises, but also generally as leaders to learn. So depending on where you are today in terms of feeling uncertain or certain about what's going on, it'll be useful as a tool for leaders on the line anyway. I'm making the assumption that on the line I have leaders, but that I also have people who are not leaders. And so this presentation is useful, hopefully, to any of you. If you can hear me at the moment, I'm getting no background. So Nick, can you just let me know if you can actually hear me?
Yep,
sorry, I'm not seeing anything or on the screen. I've just got a grey screen. Apologies for that, because we did have a trial and everything was fine. I do have, so I can go through if you can tell me that you can hear and that the others can see, I can.
We can hear you, Aileen, and we've got your title slide up now.
Okay, great. So if I can just ask you, Sally, to move through the slides, if I can just say move, because I'm not seeing, and I can go through the presentation without needing to use slides or seeing you guys on the screen. So the first thing is thinking about our brain and how our brain works. So what our brain is doing constantly, it's constantly doing this, is scanning our environment for whether there might be a threat or a reward. And if there is a choice of a reward or a threat, it'll always move away from the threat before it goes towards a reward. So as the leaders on the line, what we're trying to do is to help our people see some rewards in what can be quite a threatening situation for them at the moment, or may feel that way. So one tool that I use, and I've used this for a number of years, is one by Dr. David Rock. But before I go into that tool, I just want to give you a bit of an understanding of how our brain treats threats. Our brain treats threats in 3 levels. Level 1 is being aware. So I want you to imagine that you are in a lion safari, and because you are in a lion safari, you are actually going to be aware. You're aware that you're in the environment where there are lions around. The brain treats that as a level 1 threat, an awareness. All of a sudden, you can hear the lions roaring fairly close. The brain treats that as a level 2 threat. It's starting to say now, this threat is actually quite close. So in the terms of COVID, level 1 was when we knew that there was a virus in China, and it wasn't necessarily going to impact us in our thoughts. We were aware of it, but it wasn't something that we thought much more about. That was probably in about January. When it became to late February, we started to see that there was actually some situations of exposure in Australia, and we became a level 2 threat. We became much more alert, just like we were hearing that lion's roar. Now, the third level is when you're in that lion safari and you can actually see the lion, and it looks to you to be in a distance where it can run towards you. In that case, it's survival. You're in panic. And at that stage with COVID, that was when it was named a pandemic, and we had lockdown and shutdown. And for anyone who's on the call, who's from the event space, you know exactly what that felt like. And myself as a face-to-face trainer, exactly what that felt like. What will we do? There was a lot of panic at that time. When the body is in level 3, it is actually quite damaging to the body. What actually happens is we're increased our level of stress, and at the same time, our cognitive abilities, our ability to think, is being decreased. So if we're staying there for any period of time, it's damaging to our body, it's damaging to our immune system, it's damaging to our digestive system, and also we simply can't think to be able to work productively. So what our goal is to remove ourselves, and as the leaders on the line, to help remove people from that level 3 threat into a level 2 or perhaps a level 1. If I could move to the next slide now, and what I use is a model by a guy called Dr. David Rock. I love his work because it's really quite quick to understand, and it's a simple tool that we can use whether there's a crisis or not. So what the model is called, it's referred to as SCARF. And why I also like that as an analogy at the moment is that the COVID-19 or the coronavirus is a flu-like virus. And when you think of flu, you think of winter. And when you think of winter, you may need to pop a scarf on. So for me, the scarf analogy is a good one to remember at this time. So what does it stand for? Well, the letters are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. I'm going to break those down now and move to the next slide, where I help you understand where your people may be now, or certainly were previously, but may still be now when it comes to where we are in COVID and their status. So what is status? So status is our brain's ability to, or our brain's need rather, to say, how do I relate to others? How professional am I? What's my image compared to others? I know that I've potentially got some people on the line who are salespeople. So salespeople would have had a style, a confidence. They were reaching their KPIs because they were doing it in the way that worked for them. And they've been perhaps practicing that for some time. And it was their professional image. It was their edge. It was their image. And that might have involved walking into an environment where they're going to visit clients. All of a sudden, that changed for them. They're no longer able to do that, and certainly we're no longer able to do it almost immediately. So instead of that, they may have had to use Zoom calls like I'm doing today. And at the moment, I'm looking at a grey screen. Obviously, something's happened with my connectivity, and I'm looking at a grey screen. Do I feel as professional as I normally would? Perhaps not. So status is our brain's notation of how do I relate to others. So the sorts of things that people might be saying is it's quite hard to be professional when I'm trying to homeschool, or I'm trying to work in an environment where I've got other people working from home, or I just can't simply get into offices the way that I used to do that. This technology that we've moved really quickly to, the digital space, for some people that's just been so natural. For others, it's been more challenging. They've had to learn skills, and it's a bit clunky at first, so doesn't feel quite as professional as it might do in some weeks or some months. So that can take a challenge. Another one is some of the projects have been put on hold, and that's just because people are perhaps reserving budgets, or if you are in the event space for obvious reasons, the impact that does have. If I can move to the next slide to look at what certainty and how that's been challenged during this period of COVID. So certainty is our brain's ability to predict what's going to happen. And the sorts of things that team members are saying is, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when I'll be going back into the office. I don't know if I'm going to get this coronavirus, and if I do, what impact it might have. I don't know if if a family member may have it. I'm concerned about that because I just don't know. And uncertainty is one of the biggest challenges, because we are, as human beings, we're actually looking for what we can logically attach ourselves to. And when things are a little uncertain, we're looking for that certainty. And quite often we're looking to it from our leaders. And at the same time, our leaders are feeling just as uncertain. Our governments were feeling quite uncertain. One government federally was saying something that the states might have been saying something different. So there's been an enormous amount, as you can imagine, of uncertainty during this time. And that is quite a challenge for the brain. For someone like me, I'm a spontaneous person that loves variety, that actually seeks out spontaneity and not having things over certain. At this time, I'm really craving that certainty. So I figure that, if I am, there'll be people in your teams that they feel comfort with certainty generally. And during this period, that's been ramped up more, as you can imagine. So the next one, if we can move to the next slide, if you don't mind, Sal, is autonomy. So that's the brain's ability to feel like they're in control. And at this point in time, a lot of people are saying to me, I actually don't feel I'm in control. I'm feeling like I'm having bombarded with Zoom meetings and Zoom calls, and I'm not feeling like I've got time to do things the way that I would normally do it, and to take the time to do things in that way. Some people have said, look, my manager is calling me every morning, and then he's calling me again every afternoon, and I'm feeling completely micromanaged. And then I speak to that same manager, and the manager says to me, I'm really trying to check in with my people. I'm calling them in the morning and I'm calling them in the afternoon, and just to see how they are. So you can imagine just how that might feel for one person versus the other person trying to do the right thing. So autonomy is our brain's need to be in control and to have some sense of choice. Interesting enough with this, in the beginning, we were told to stay home, we were told to wash our hands, we were told to social distance, we were told. And some people felt that autonomy, or our brains did, that was being challenged. once it made sense to us as to why we were doing that and the benefits of doing that, we actually moved from feeling like we're being told to feeling like we choose to sanitize our hands more regularly, to stay 1.5 distance away from people. We make choices. And when we do that, we have got much more control. And so I'll move now to the next slide. Sorry. And I'm hoping that this is all coming through because as I said, I'm not seeing what you may be seeing. So the next slide is relatedness. So that is our need to connect. So it's the brain's need to feel safe through being connecting with others. And of course, COVID-19 has created social distancing. I'm actually calling it physical distancing because we are actually connecting socially on so many different ways that we wouldn't otherwise be doing. So, but there is definitely the physical distance that's between people. People are working from home. They're not in their, some people are, and they're not in their normal workspaces. And if they are in their normal workspaces, it doesn't look like it did before because there are less people there, or they can't necessarily go to a client and have that coffee, share that coffee, be in a coffee shop with them. So those situations of how we relate have been removed from us. And because of that, we have this need to feel connected, and that has such an impact on our productivity because we just don't feel as connected to what's going on. It might be that we are out of sight, out of mind, so we don't feel that we're as connected to what's going on in the workplace, and so it has an impact on our productivity, and that's quite a big one. I will say to you that most people think that people join businesses or stay with businesses because of the financial reward. It's actually proven that the number one reason that people stay connected to their business or enjoy their workplaces is because they feel they've got a connection at work, a friend at work. It's the number one. So if that's been impacted by COVID, as it has, that might be really challenging your people, especially those extroverts. For those salespeople on the line, this might be the one that you're feeling more than the others. And if I can move to the next slide, which is the fairness, which is the last acronym of SCARF. And fairness is our ability to kind of challenge, our brain's ability to say, was that fair or was that unfair? Sometimes things feel really unfair because we don't have the full picture of it. And what I will talk about in the second half of this presentation is what can we do? So this is what it is, but what can we do as leaders? And I'll walk through each of them and help you understand what to do. Just in this one, it's things like why do hairdressers get to work, but beauticians can't? That doesn't seem fair. So it's the ability, it's a brain's need to kind of connect what is fair or what is not fair. Sometimes things on the surface feel incredibly unfair, but when you know what the rationale is behind it, it makes much more sense. So we can't change how people feel until we've helped them understand the rationale. And we'll look at that in a moment. So if you have any questions about the model itself, pop it into the chat or into the Q&A, and I'll definitely respond to those. Or if you want to know more about that at another time, I'm more than happy. So SCARF is a tool that is used to understand what our brain is actually doing. Now, it's not necessarily that we're even thinking about this. It's a response, and it's usually an immediate response to something. So it's what leaders can do is, first of all, if I can get you to move to the slide that says how can leaders help, or the one beyond that, Sally, which is the first thing is you need to help others. You need to be able to be in the best shape yourself. You need to put your own oxygen mask on. You need to be in the best place to give of yourself. And to do that, I will suggest to people, run the SCARF ruler across your own situation. Do you feel that your status has been impacted? Do you feel that you have enough certainty? Do you need to ask some more questions? Do you feel that you have the sense of autonomy and control over the things that are in your remit? Do you feel that you are getting connection and relationships? Is there ways that you could be getting it that are not necessarily face to face, but are being satisfied? And do you think that you can, the things that you are not sure about, the fairness of processes, do you think that you could challenge those in a professional way? So the first thing is to really look at yourself and take that care and take that time to be the leader. We're going to now move into what you do then as a leader to help your people through each of those, if that's what's impacting them. So I'll start, Sally, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide that just is the model again. So this is the SCARF model. And what we need to do as leaders is we need to try and create an opportunity to find rewards and reduce threats. So maximise a reward and reduce a threat during this time. And so how do you do that? So Sally, if you could move to the following slide. And the first thing that you could do is to really understand what is going on for your people. Think about the SCARF ruler for them. Is their status impacted? Do they feel a sense of less professional than they were? Do they feel that they are as important to other people in the team? Have I got people in my team that are doing work that might seem to them to be more menial, but it's really important? So if that's the case, they may be feeling, I'm not doing important work. And one of the things that you can do as a leader is tell them that every single piece of work at the moment is working towards our goal that we need to achieve, and every piece of work is important. So make sure that you're elevating their status and helping them understand how to feel about what's going on. Make connections at the moment with what they're doing and the vision of where you're going. This is not the time, and even now that we're in May, I originally put this together in March, but even in May, it's not the time to be great big goals and visions. It's about what are we doing this week. For some of you that are in, even say in our event space, it's what are we doing today? What's one thing that we can do today that's going to help us move a little forward in any way that it might be. It's not the time necessarily for the great big pieces of visionary work, but it is the time to keep people connected. And the main message here is some key behaviours that you can use as leaders is to be empathetic, to show empathy. And to show empathy is to kind of stop and really think about what is going on for that individual. Personalise it. Different people in your team will feel more strongly about this status than others. So personalise it to your team. Be intentional. Take a couple of minutes. I suggest to leaders that they take 5 minutes at either end of their day, every day, regardless of crises, to think about how I'm going to intentionally show up for my people and how I'm going to be thinking about what is the impact for them. What we're trying to do as in leadership is we're trying to get the best out of our people. We're trying to get people to be their best and to do their best towards the vision. And so by being intentional and planning for that, even just a couple of moments puts us into the right mindset to do that. And recognition is a good thing to do in this place of status, recognising the importance of what people are doing, even though it may seem less, it may seem more menial than what they would like to be doing. Sally, if you could move to the next slide. So how can a leader provide certainty? Well, the important thing here is communicate. Tell them what you can tell them, but tell them when you are in a place of confidence. Sometimes, and we may have some leaders on the line that are in a middle leadership role. So some information has come to them and they then need to share it with their teams. Make sure that you are in a place of confidence when you are communicating. It's important that you project that to your people, that you may not have all the answers, and it's a good thing to tell them that I don't have all the answers. What I can tell you is this. But be in the right headspace. If you've just heard some news that doesn't sit well with you and you're feeling really emotional about that news, take a couple of moments to have a cuppa, go for a quick walk, do something that puts you into a place that you've moved from reaction to response. Be as confident as you can in your communications, because your people are looking for your cues. And in this time of uncertainty, if they feel like you've completely lost it, they're going to create that energy is going to be transferable. So just make sure that you're as confident as you can, communicate as much as you can. What is a good suggestion is to pop in maybe a weekly update. So you could potentially, I call it COVID update, a weekly update. And in that update, you may have nothing to tell. There may be nothing new, but there may be a whole lot of things that are new that you can share at that point in time. What that does for our brain, or the brains of the people that are your direct reports, is it says to them, I've got some uncertainties, but it's okay, because at 10 o'clock on Thursday, I can share those with my manager, or my manager can share them with me. So that helps the brain by putting something in place, if you can do that. So plan for those updates. The key behaviours here is showing that empathy. This is going to be all the way through, but being as confident as you can be as transparent as you can, tell what you can. Sometimes the news is not good. Sometimes it's dramatically, impactful, but it's really important that you actually give people a sense of transparency and openness and honesty about what potential may be, but also give them this sense of hope of what we can do together, the things that we can do, and then showing kindness at this time. If you're in a very fortunate position that you're, as some businesses are, that are absolutely thriving at this time, it may be the time to share something in that kindness with someone else, to share something that you can do. And provide that certainty. Sally, if you could move to the next slide around autonomy. So how does a leader increase their people's autonomy? Well, the autonomy, as we said, is the need to actually have this sense of control. And you'll be surprised just how much control we do actually have, how much has not changed. Our knowledge, for example, you imagine the salesperson, the knowledge that they had to be able to do what they do is still there. That is, they give them that sense of control over that. They're just potentially sharing it in a different way, but their knowledge is still there, the knowledge that got them to where they are. So what can they control? So they may be able to control things like they may be able to set blocks of time in the day where they do some planning times. They may have some autonomy to work more flexibly than they have in the past. As a leader, look for ways that you can provide flexibility and provide them with a sense of autonomy, a sense of control. And that could be things like where they have, they do their conference calls and at the times that they do that. It might be, as I said, content. The big thing here might be helping them understand that you are looking for the output of what they deliver, not necessarily the input. So if they want to do it and it's comfortable for them to do it in a certain way, if they are working from home and they're doing their work mostly early hours in the morning before their children get up, for example, and they're delivering, then recognise the output. Don't try to replace the office scenario, because we're not in it. We're certainly not in that space. And for those that are out and about and still working, allow people as much as you can to be as flexible as they can. Our clients are going to need them to be flexible. Be flexible with your people and also with your clients. So provide as much autonomy and as much sharing with them of control as you can. Remind them what they actually do know. And a lot of that is their knowledge. So remind them of the knowledge that they have and the gifts that brings to the team. To the next slide is the relationships. So there's lots of challenges in us being, obviously with social distancing, we can't hug like we can't handshake like we used to. There's lots of limitations that are going to probably stay in our world for some time. I think that this one, the social distancing, will be here with us and our way around it until there's a vaccine. So we could be looking at some time for that. It could well be, could be as early as in the next sort of 6 or 8 months, but it could well go out to 18 months and beyond. So our way of how we relate to people has already changed and will probably be with us for the future, at least for the short term, and maybe even into long-term future. So how do we do that? Because this is something that we know that people really need to feel safe. And there's lots of ways that you can do it. One of the ways that's really successful is to set up a buddy system within your environment. So if you've got someone who is working from home and someone else is working in their other home, they may be buddies. It might be that we're working in the office and we've got a buddy of someone who's out on the, one of our field techs who's out on the road. So just setting up a buddy system so that people feel connected to someone else during that time. Find creative ways to use the virtual space. At the moment, I'm using it, in a way that I'm hoping that you guys can all still hear me. Can I just get you still hear me? Sorry.
Yep, you're fine.
Thank you. Sorry, I've just had call going in the background. I thought, I hope that's not you. Sorry, guys. That just threw me just for a bit. Be creative ways around the virtual space. It could well be some people, get people to share things that they're in their own homes, and if they are working in that virtual space, they might use the green room to use a backdrop that gives people something that looks appealing. So look for creative ways to connect with your people. One of the things that I learned the other day that's really surprised me, and it probably shouldn't have actually, but would it surprise you to know that on our phone, on our mobile phone, and we still do call it a mobile phone, some call it a device, but we do call it a mobile phone, that the phone is actually the 6th used functionality of the phone. So we don't pick it up. We get on text, we get on apps, we use Instagrams, we use social media, but it's the 6th most used application. And I think that is something that in this time you should be encouraging your people to get on the phone, if it's not a Zoom, and actually talk to a person. Texting doesn't provide the brain with the same connection of relatedness as hearing a voice or seeing a face. So the best scenario is being physically in the room. We know that's challenged. The next would be to have that face-to-face connection so you can actually see the faces. And then the next would be to phone, and then it would come to the text or the social media's connections. So just thinking about how you do connect. And key relationships, again, is empathy, showing that kindness, really actively listening for the body language as well as what is being said, and having the intentionality. So if you are using Zoom actually is really interesting, because I know a lot of people feel tired after a Zoom meeting, more tired than they would if they were going to a face-to-face meeting. And that's very real, because during this time when we are on a Zoom call, we're actually very present. We're seeing the faces of other people, and we're really connecting. So using that time to really build your listening skills and your listening for the non-verbal cues. So looking at body language, looking at whether that person is participating as much as they normally would, looking for things that are inside or outside of normal character is a good opportunity to do in this time and in this space, and being really intentional. So if I can get you to move to the final one for this, which is showing fairness. So what can you do to show fairness? Now, sometimes things don't feel fair. What we do know, though, is that if the brain understands why you did it, the rationale behind it, the process that the decision was made, they may not agree with it, they may not like it, but they are much more likely to connect with it, to get on and do what needs to be done. They're much less likely to get caught up in that emotional space of non-productivity because things are not fair. This is one of the ones, the fairness, part of our brain that looks at fairness. Also, it's sitting right next to disgust. So if you walk past in a street and you see someone spit, immediately you have a reaction to that of disgust. And it's an immediate reaction. That part of the brain is sitting right next to fairness. So fairness, for people, they have this reaction to it. And so what we need to do as leaders is help them unpack that reaction and make them understand the rationale. Why did that happen? What was it? What's the reason for this? It might feel unfair that they get to work from home, for example, and you don't, but it may well be because of this rationale. This is the reasons for that, and this is why the type of work that you do or they do, and whatever. So if people understand the rationale, they will much more likely to allow that part to be that part of the brain that also connects with other emotions to be much more ready for productivity. And that's what we want. We want a healthy team that is as safe as they can be and also as productive as they can be. So showing them the rationale behind fairness is about sharing. The behaviours are, again, empathy. Empathy is all the way through this. In fact, the number one thing that leaders of the generation that we are now going into, particularly heightened by COVID, the number one skill that they believe we need to work on, and it is a skill, is our empathy. And you'll see that it's come through all the way through this. Empathy, objectivity, so getting that logical, helping the logical part of the brain understand the rationale for the decision. They may not understand why it's happening. They may not agree with it, but they understand why. Communicate as much as you can, be transparent and personalise it. Understand where they're coming from and personalise the conversations to them. Talk to them about how they might be feeling during this period. Okay, so that's it for that part of it. I've just got one more slide, or two slides. One slide, which is the next one, is what capabilities do leaders need in the new normal? So what are the major capabilities? And so if we can move with this slide does have animation to the point where each one comes through separately. But I'll start with the digital literacy. That's going to be an absolute heightened a skill that we need to build, because our world is the new normal is going to have a lot more digital, and it was going to anyway. This has actually just made it, fast track that. But the new normal will have more digital literacy requirements. That might be, for example, when we go back in so that we're all working in the same space, we might still choose to use a Zoom call when people are in their own homes to do a brainstorming meeting, for example. That's been proven. Brainstorming is far more effective when you're actually in that space. So having some digital literacy and understanding the technicalities of how things work in that space is going to be very important. Innovation. So our ability to pivot, as the word, I'm sort of was trying my hardest to avoid using the term pivot, but it's a bit of a jargon word that you may have heard, but basically it is about how do we change doing that process, doing that piece of work. And I know there's been some amazing examples in our own industry of how people have done that. I've seen some great things from the event space on how they're setting up things like mobile medical clinics and such, which is fabulous. So how can we be innovative, and how can we and that's a skill again that you can absolutely develop. Resilience, our ability to be resilient and to bounce forward. I call it bounce forward rather than bounce back, because we really are. It's all about moving forward. And there's through the HRIA, there's a number of programs that you can actually take that do cover these things. So resilience being one. Empathy is, absolutely sits with self-awareness and being empathetic. That's going to be an incredible skill for leaders to have. Trust, be able to trust your people, trust the output. Building trust is, you have to give yourself permission to actually want to start from a position of trust. Some people will do that naturally. Other people actually on the call won't. They'll start with a position of, I'll believe it when I see it. Having trust and being open to what you can't see is going to be a skill, of a capability to build. Collaboration. This industry incredible for that, in terms of we do share a lot of, we don't share our own IP, but we absolutely do share our experiences. And so building on that collaboration is key. Being shrewd, being able to read the market, being able to look at what's coming next. What is going to be, is there going to be another wave? What would that mean? Have I got all my oxygen tanks in place? What am I ready? Am I going to be ready for it? Having that ability to look forward, and that is something that you can build. Some people are really natural at doing that. They're very natural at looking in the windscreen. Others are much more comfortable with looking in the rear vision mirror. So building that skill to be able to do both. And then the thing that I have in bold there is being customer focused. Everything that we are doing is through the lens of which our customers need. And our customers are obviously our customers in the line of those that pay us, and our customers are also in the line of those that we pay. So identifying our customers and being really focused on that, that's going to be a skill. Removing our traditional hierarchy view of things and saying, okay, well, that guy in the team, he may be far more junior than me, but he is my customer right now, because what I'm about to do adds value to what he has to do next, or detracts from that value. So really understanding the customer and who the customer is, and being really focused on that is going to be a skill. So I will take a breath. The next slide is for further information to connect with Steph, and Steph's details are there. But I will take a breath and see if there is any questions that have popped up. I really do apologise that I'm staring at a grey screen at the moment, which obviously doesn't happen in rehearsal. It happens post that, and it's happened immediately from going live. But I can answer questions because I obviously know the content. And I guess because I was coming through in that way, there might have been a little bit of paper shuffling, which normally I don't touch the paper because it's, but I needed it to guide me to what the next slide was today. So apologies for any background noise that you might have heard as a result of that. But I'll ask if there's any questions.
Yeah, thanks for that, Aileen, and thank you for a great presentation. I got a lot about that personally, lots of tips and tricks and some really good insights as well. The first question is actually my question, so I've put myself to the top of the queue if that's okay.
Of course.
But in any case, so you know, we live in a world of technology, and sometimes things do go wrong, as you mentioned. So are you about a level 1 in terms of threat to the?
Yeah, do you know what? That actually really did throw me because I had, because I'd had an experience with technology not working terribly well. I've actually spent a fair bit of time on planning for that. You know, planning my technology and rehearsing, something that I don't naturally do. So I done, and I don't know whether, I think potentially it might be my laptop because there's all sort of, what I'm seeing at the moment is all sort of squiggly lines like your TV tunes just removed. But yeah, it did. It made me, it moved me from a level 1 to a level 2 and almost got into a level 3. That's for sure. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, no, listen, you know, from our end as well, obviously we do the rehearsals, and when it first happened, for me, cognitive ability took a big dive. Just trying to, but this is the world we live in, and I think it's fantastic. So,
yeah. And thanks for Sally and Linda for the recovery piece there, and that kind of just proves how much the importance of team. You know, it's definitely, someone might be the front end for those sales guys out there. You might be absolutely front end, but for that to work, it's all the people behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
So a few questions have come through. One of them is obviously empathy has really been a core focus all the way through your presentation. And you know, if I'm a leader, and for me, empathy is not something that comes naturally, I might be sort of more analytical or dry in my approach. What sort of practical tips and maybe exercises can you give for someone who's not naturally empathetic in their leadership style?
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question. So the empathy is about listening with your ears, with your eyes, and with your gut. So it's actually being intentional. How am I listening now? So the one key thing is to think about, how do you listen? Do you listen with the intent to speak, or are you really listening? So giving yourself time and the practice of actually really listening. So ways that you can be more empathetic might be to start to watch things from different cultures. So looking at that, even just doing things like that, watching a movie from a culture that is not your culture starts to get you to understand different people. So you can practice. There's some really great ways of practicing empathy, but the number one is checking yourself out. How am I listening? Am I listening just with my ears at the moment? Am I listening with my ears and my eyes? Am I listening for their body language? And am I listening for my gut? Is it telling me at the moment that person doesn't normally react like that, and something's not quite right? So practicing active listening in a very active way. Eyes, ears, gut is my number one tip for building empathy.
And when I sort of, I've heard the term active listening before, and part of that, I guess, is one of the things is to hear a question and then repeat it back to the person that asked the question and saying, have I got that right? Is that what you're asking? And that might be potentially that first step in terms of making sure that you're listening properly, and also that you're demonstrating an understanding of where their query lies.
That's right. Especially when there's a reaction. What we see often is the emotion. We see the anger, we see the sulking, we see the emotion. What we don't, and we focus on the emotion. With empathy, using empathy, we're actually going behind, we're going further than that. We're removing, we're going to the next layer of the reaction. What are they actually reacting to? Because what happens is if we focus on the emotion, if they're angry, we can become angry. We mirror it. But if we say, okay, it's representing itself as anger, but what are they actually reacting to? And we go deeper. What is it that they're actually reacting to? So, and you can even say that to them. You can say, you know, I can see that you're having a reaction to that. Can you help me understand what that's about? So rather than, you know, getting in with them and trying to map their anger with your anger or their silence with your silence. So
yeah, fantastic. So another question that's come through is around, I guess, fairness. So one of those key elements that you talked about, that SCARF model. So if I'm as a leader and I've or someone in my team has been given a directive by me as a leader, and that team member feels that it's unfair or that they're not entirely comfortable with it, and as a leader you believe it actually is fair, what tips do you have or what advice do you have in terms of addressing that?
Yeah, good. Yeah. So the first thing is not to go into that battle of trying to justify fair, not fair, fair. You know, but it's really trying to. It's understanding again that is a reaction. And as I mentioned when the presentation, fairness sits right next to that sort of feeling of disgust. So it's actually it's that sort of reaction to it. So the best thing is really being objective, rational, saying what they might be thinking. Look, I can tell from what you're saying that you might feel that this is unfair, and would I be right there? And then pause and let them say, yeah, I do feel that it's unfair. Okay, so let me try and help you understand from my perspective why we came to this decision. Whatever the rationale is. Is that helpful to? And quite often people will say, I still don't agree with it, but now I've got a better understanding. So really being taking the time. It's quicker just to go, well, that's just a decision, mate, get over it, or that's just a decision. The decision's been made. It's quicker to do that, but in the longer term, the impact to productivity is so diminished by that part of the brain being impacted. It holds on to it for so long. So you want a healthy, happy, productive team. And so just taking a few minutes to talk about the rationale will make a big difference there.
Yeah, and you know, for me, the thing that comes through with that as well is that, you know, you touched on their empathy and transparency again, to when you're sort of addressing those conflicting or differences in opinion, empathy and transparency.
And sometimes things are not fair. You know, that doesn't, you know, that's like, you know, I was talking, as I said, to someone who has a beautician practice, and they're saying, I just don't understand it. I'm not touching them any more than someone who's a hairdresser. Sometimes it's, you just can't explain why that's been made, why that decision's been made. But what you need to say is, okay, well, that is the decision. So how can we work within the circumstances that we do have? So how can we find some things in here, you know, as a leader, how can we find some things in here that really do connect to fairness? Because what we're trying to do with SCARF's model, so it's Dr. David Rock, for those that, I know the prezzo's going out, but is trying to eliminate as much of the threat as you can and create as much reward as you can. So try to help people understand what parts of it have been fair. Did they think the process was fair? You could ask questions like that. Do you think that my communication to you has been fair? Do you believe that, you know, so you get them to connect to what has been fair in it. Do you think that you've been heard? Do you think your voice has been heard? Yes, I do, but I still don't agree with it. But do you think it was a fair process? And so then the brain is going, yeah, fairness, because that's what we're obviously removing that reactivity and going to response.
Yeah, fantastic. Sorry, if there's any other questions that anyone in the webinar wants to ask, please just type them up now. One thing from me as well is that maybe an observation as well, but maybe you can expand on it. I noticed a lot of the presentation, carries that mate to manager header. So that's obviously a course that you've developed, for our industry, and a lot of our members have taken it up and they've gotten some fantastic results for it. Is it fair to say that everything that you've presented in this webinar so far, really effective for going through this COVID crisis, but also just in terms of building yourself as a leader, it translates out of this current crisis as well?
Absolutely. This is, the reason that this was put together was I have a mate to manager group that were, going through it live. So it was actually put together for that group, which is why it does have the Mate to Manager logo. And but this is a tool. SCARF is a tool, and most people can connect, with the tool. They'll remember that. This can be used all the time. So and I think it's probably one of the best tools to use, because it's easy to understand quickly, and as leaders you can kind of start to go, okay, so let me take a moment, let me be empathetic, let me step back, and where is it that the person I'm dealing with now, which one of these is impacting? It'll be one. It'll absolutely be one.
Yeah.
What can I do? Yeah. So it's a handy tool, I think.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks very much for that, Aileen. We don't have any other questions that have come through at this stage. So we might wrap this up, but just a few things to close off. If you do have any questions following this, please send them through to the office. We're more than happy to pass them on to Aileen, and she can give you a call back and perhaps chat through those answers. As I mentioned previously, this has been recorded, so you can go back and refer to this presentation, and please pass it on to your colleagues as well. We really want to support you guys during this time. At the conclusion of this webinar, there will be a survey page that comes up. If you can take the time to complete that survey, that would be really appreciated. It gives us the opportunity to make sure that we're addressing the right things for you as members, and also in terms of planning what we do in the future, we can make sure that we're tailoring content towards what you need. As I mentioned, for HIRE20, though it didn't happen physically, we still have our sponsors who have supported us. You will see on the various Facebook and LinkedIn social media channels that there's a number of show specials that some of our sponsors have made available. So please do check them out. There may be an opportunity to do some purchasing prior to the end of the financial year. As I've also mentioned, HIRE21 has been announced. It is going to be in the Gold Coast, and we're really looking forward to re-engaging with our members face to face. It's one of those rare opportunities where, as an association, we get to meet with each other at a national level in a face-to-face environment. So yeah, we're really looking forward to that. Finally, thank you for attending this webinar. One thing I'd really look to reiterate is that from the HRIA's perspective, our number one priority during this process, from the board level to the national office to the state committees to all the subcommittees and focus groups, our number one priority during this time is to support you guys, to make sure that you can weather this storm, and also that you're in the best possible position to accelerate out of this in terms of your recovery. If there's anything that you feel we could be doing, please contact the national office. Other than that, thank you very much, and please stay safe, and check into the other HIRE20 webinars if you get a chance. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Nick.